Council meeting to order. If you could find your seats, please. The first thing on our evening's agenda is approval of minutes from the June CAG meeting. Those minutes were sent out via email to our voting membership, and I would look for a motion to approve those minutes unless there are correction needed. I have a motion to approve the minutes without correction. A second? Alrighty. I would also do a roll call of our officers present. Myself, Doug Clemens, I'm chair.
Ron Allen, co-chair.
Ricky Wilson, secretary. Rhonda Steelman, treasurer.
Bill Wilson, member at large.
Lynn Lake, member at large.
Thank you all. All right, and we're up to the treasurer's report.
For the month ending June 30th, there was no income and no expenses reported, so the balance is $383.97. And I do encourage donations. It's costing us about $50 every month when we need to meet our operating expenses. You can talk to me after class.
Thank you for that. All right, and we're moving on to the Executive Board's report. Our last meeting was on the 8th of July. Present at that meeting was Bob Nolan, Bernita Wilson, Bill Wilson, Rhonda was absent, and Lynn was absent. During that discussion, we talked about the minutes and made corrections to the minutes from our reporting and from observations. We discussed the questions submitted to the EPA. We decided to remove questions number 2 and questions number 9. I will address those when I get done with the Executive Board minutes. We were curious when the soil sampling for the BMAC field was going to come out, and we set the date for the next upcoming meetings. The 11th of August, which is a Monday, will be our next public meeting. Our next Executive Board meeting will be the 5th of August. Questions 2 and 9, respectively. Question 2 was about emergency planning directed to the EPA. EPA has actually answered that question for us before. Emergency planning is not done by the EPA. Emergency planning is done by St. Louis County Emergency Management, who is actually with us this evening to address your concerns and questions. Question number 9 was a question asking why EPA is not working on other sites in North County. Those sites actually are currently being remediated under a program that was started by the Department of Energy called FUSRAP by the Army Corps of Engineers. FUSRAP with the Army Corps is still working on those remediation areas with the participation of the EPA. So frankly, that question is kind of a moot question. We do have some announcements to make. Lois Gibbs, who is famed from Love's Canal, she actually took EPA representatives captive for a little while to get them to see her point of view. She's actually coming to town with some of her associates to do a free educational seminar on August the 16th, which is a Saturday. Now, this is an educational seminar, it's an all-day thing. They will provide lunch, but you must register. And you can find out more about this by going through the community group's Facebook page or the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. There have been several reports of vandalism and theft to the machines that the EPA has put out to help us keep our community safe. I'm pretty certain no one in this room is guilty of doing such a thing, but I would like you all to be a little extra vigilant. These are our tax dollars at work here, and they're designed to keep our community safe, so we really want to catch the people that are doing this and stop them. Now, another part of the Executive Board meeting was a discussion of the BMAC response to, our response to the EPA regarding BMAC. There have been several, it's been a few months since we got a notice from the Gismond STL group that they had done independent testing at the Richmond Municipal Athletic Complex. Those tests were submitted to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is the bar in testing for radionuclides. Those tests came back on the 26th, and they did find lead-210 in the soil. We've had several reports and comments by primarily Director Carl Brooks of Region 7, indicating the ball field is fine for all uses. We've looked at those statements, we've looked at the report side of those statements, and we've looked at the testing which EPA has recently conducted at Richmond Municipal Athletic Complex. We have constructed a letter, which took us a great deal of time, as a response to the Environmental Protection Agency Region 7. At this time, I would like to read that letter into record. I'm going to take a drink of water first. Bear with me. The letter is titled West Lake Landfill Community Advisory Group Executive Committee Response to Environmental Protection Agency's proclamations regarding the Richmond Municipal Athletic Complex. West Lake Landfill Community Advisory Group, CAG, Executive Committee notes that the United States Environmental Protection Agency, EPA Region 7, has not held up its responsibility to protect human health and the environment at the Richmond Municipal Athletic Complex, BMAC. EPA Region 7 has presented misleading information to the public, failed to follow standards that they themselves implemented for testing of a potentially radiologically impacted site, and ignored sound data. We have examined the EPA Region 7 claims and statements, and it is the conclusion of this committee that the EPA should no longer have a role in testing or remediation at BMAC. We formally requested another federal agency re-examine the BMAC site for radiologically impacted material. While our CAG is primarily concerned with West Lake's Superfund site, BMAC shares the same community as West Lake Landfill, and in our role as representatives of the community, we must speak to those issues as well as those at West Lake Landfill. The radioactive materials illegally dumped at West Lake Landfill in 1973 come from a greater problem in the St. Louis metropolitan area. These contaminants were not only created in the St. Louis area, but were improperly handled, leaving radioactive materials spread across a wide area running from downtown St. Louis through North St. Louis County and into St. Charles County. These materials are dangerous, spread throughout the area by mishandling and improper transportation, and new sites are still being tested and remediated. A number of these sites are currently being remediated by the United States Army Corps of Engineers working in the area under the formally utilized Sites Remedial Action Program, FUSRAP, at a cost of $1.7 billion. The area around BMAC has changed greatly over the last 72 years, from 1942 to 1943. The majority of radioactive materials are being transported down St. Charles Rock Road. The primary haul route, not only to West Lake Landfill in 1973, but to and from St. Charles County, where Weldon Spring Uranium Feed Mill Plant was located, with the history of improper transportation used in the transfer of materials to and from Weldon Spring, and the known improper transportation used in the transportation of materials to West Lake Landfill, it is not only reasonable to suspect but probable that the area around St. Charles Rock Road is contaminated by these same radioactive materials. While the EPA Region 7 assures the public that radioactive waste along the areas of concern along St. Charles Rock Road are below background levels, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, MDNR, test they cite as proof states that the waste is in fact at levels higher than background, an MDR report from 2005. The CAG Board has found statements and information provided by the EPA Region 7 to be misleading regarding BMAC. Our immediate observation is that the EPA Region 7 made claims of safety prematurely. EPA Region 7 Director Dr. Carl Brooks stated that there is no evidence available to the EPA or DNR that establishes any reason to change the use of the fields from Post-Dispatch article May 9, 2014. In fact, there had been testing that had shown evidence that there were elevated levels of radionuclides. This testing was submitted by the Just Moms STL group. Director Brooks has repeatedly criticized the Just Moms STL testing, calling it questionable protocol and analysis post-dispatch. And during his press conference on May 9, 2014, said the test by the Moms group was not scientifically legitimate. While attempting to invalidate concerns about BMAC, Dr. Brooks and the EPA have cited 3 tests. None of these tests invalidate the results submitted by the Just Moms STL group. The first test cited by the EPA is a 2013 MDNR test, which is the only test other than the Moms STL, which has physically taken samples at BMAC. EPA Region 7 criticized the Moms group, saying the individuals collected the soil from a drainage ditch, not from the ball fields, an EPA statement April 30, 2014. This statement is not accurate. The Moms group did take samples from the ball fields and the drainage ditch, and results showed areas of serious concern. MDNR, however, only tested two areas, pavement and a grass island in the parking lot. MDR report, May 16, 2013. This is not the only problem using this test to declare BMAC safe. The objective of this survey was to collect radiological readings upwind and downwind from the site using odor as an indication of downwind direction. In other words, the test was for contamination of air, not soil. That is why MDNR took dust samples instead of soil samples. The MDNR test was never designed or intended to check for radioactive contamination in BMAC soil, and it was misleading of the EPA Region 7 to indicate that it was. The second test, which was mentioned by Director Brooks and EPA, is a survey of St. Charles Rock Road performed by MDNR in 2005. This test clearly shows radioactive contamination well above background, but below remediation levels. The testing never sampled inside BMAC. While this test cannot be used in one way or another to provide a statement about the condition of radioactive contamination at BMAC, it nonetheless demonstrates the nearby contamination of St. Charles Rock Road and is misleading to use it as a declaration of safety. The third test cited by the EPA was performed by FUSRAP under the Department of Energy's guidance. This is an actual example of testing which is not scientifically legitimate. The truth is there is neither data nor samples to validate this report. When attempting to locate the raw data which was used to construct this report under the Freedom of Information Act, the USACA, the Army Corps of Engineers, responded. The diligent search was completed by the Corps personnel and Corps contractor employees. The raw data was not part of custodial documents. This is after it went through the Department of Energy. The CAG Executive Committee finds that citation of these tests and declaration of safety before completion of testing at BMAC purposefully misleading and not in keeping with EPA's mission, which clearly states all parts of society, communities, individuals, businesses, and state and local and tribal governments have access to accurate information sufficient to effectively participate in managing human health and environmental risks. During scrutiny of the EPA's report entitled Preliminary Pre-Surplus Screening Report, Bridgeton Municipal Athletic Complex, Bridgeton, Missouri, the committee found concern with methods used to perform gamma scans at BMAC. The use of a sodium iodide scintillation detector for a site survey requires several steps to ensure accuracy. The first observation regarding testing is that sodium iodide scintillation detectors for low count rate testing like BMAC have a reading error of 50%. Cited by the EPA's own handbook on radiation survey and site inspection. The multi-agency radiation survey and site inspection manual cited by the EPA in their report goes on to tell us that sodium iodide detectors' energy response is not linear, so it should be calibrated for the energy field it will measure or have calibration factors developed by comparison with a PIC for a specific site. This check should be performed often, possibly several times each day. Nowhere in the EPA report or attached log books was the mention of ever calibrating the machine to a site-specific survey by PIC. If proper use of the sodium iodide detector was not done, it reduces the 58,716 data points in the EPA report to the accuracy of a coin toss. The release of a report without all testing complete, again, has the EPA publicly proclaiming the safety of our community at BMAC without all the facts. The report was rushed to public announcement before any raw data or test results from soil samples. The soil samples were gathered between May 21st and May 23rd. There has been adequate time for analysis and a report from the lab contractor with the EPA to be delivered. The EPA was premature in releasing the following statement: the Balkans remain suitable for use, said Carl Brooks, a regional administrator for the EPA. All current uses are appropriate at that park, including the city of Bridgeton's planned 4th of July fireworks as a celebration, Brooks said from a Post-Dispatch on June 26, 2014. The committee feels that the testing and supporting documents provided by EPA Region 7 concerning BMAC should be given great scrutiny before acceptance. Like the EPA and our elected officials, the CAG was notified by Just Mom's STL group of their independent testing at BMAC and of the lab results these tests generated. The most striking thing about the Just Mom's STL group tests are the high levels of lead-210 found in their samples. The testing was conducted by Eberline Labs in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Eberline found lead-210 at 9.1 picocuries per gram and 10.8 picocuries per gram in the two samples the Mom's group provided. Standard Level Report Analysis Work Order 14-05116 from Eberline. Eberline Labs offered information about the Army Corps of Engineers, Eberline Labs offered the information that the Army Corps of Engineers set the human health limit of 0.846 picocurious per gram above a background of 1.6 picocurious during a cleanup of the site near Dayton, Ohio. They were also good enough to send us the report, which I have attached. The EPA has plainly stated that they are looking for radium, thorium, and uranium, yet they are not looking for lead-210 at BMAC. The Just Bombs STL group notified the EPA of testing and the resulting finding of lead-210. If EPA was unwilling to accept the Eberline lab findings, FUSRAP has also found a mixture of radium-226, 228, thorium-230, 228, 232, uranium-234, 235, 238, lead-210, protactinium-231, and actinium-227 in the waste associated with North St. Louis County from the record of decision in 2005 for FUSRAP. A thorough examination of radionuclides in this area would include at a minimum the full list provided by FUSRAP, including lead-210. Because of the facts stated in this document, the West Lake Landfill CAG Executive Committee discerns EPA Region 7 to be lacking in its responsibility to protect our community. Dr. Brooks was dismissive of valid community concerns. With no facts to support conclusion of community safety, Dr. Brooks publicly declared the BMAC safe. The testing conducted on behalf of our community by EPA was not satisfactory, as it was never designed to look for the areas of concern initially raised by the community. The lack of respect given to the safety of this community by EPA Region 7 obliges the Executive Committee to request another federal agency conduct testing at BMAC, as BMAC is most probably a vicinity property resulting from years of transportation of radioactive materials from the United States Atomic Weapons Program. The committee suggests a study performed by FUSRAP. Thank you. Moving forward, we're about to enter new business. However, before we enter new business, I would like any elected officials to please identify themselves and let us know you're here. And we'll just start in this corner of the room and move on.
I'm Councilman Bob Patel from the City of Bridgeton, also candidate for St. Louis County Council.
Thank you.
Gary Germer, City of Bridgeton, Ward 2.
Thank you.
Tony Norris, City of Bridgeton, Ward 4.
Thank you.
Herb Sapp, City of Bridgeton, Ward 3.
Thank you.
Randy Hines, City of Bridgeton, Ward 3.
Thank you.
Linda Euchre, City of Bridgeton, Ward 2.
Thank you.
I'm representing House Representatives of Representative Colorado. My name is Robert Burke. Steve Sanders, St. Louis County Council.
Thank you. Are we missing anyone at this point? Joe?
Joan Middleton, representing Senator Claire McCaskill.
Thank you.
Carrie DiGregorio, representing Senator Roy Blunt.
Anyone else?
Jordan Pierce, representing Congressman BMAC.
Thank you. All righty, is that everyone at this point? For folks that aren't regular to these meetings, this is typical. We tend to have our elected officials very involved in this issue. And actually I want to take just a couple minutes out and say thank you to our federally elected officials. Recently drafted a letter speaking to the EPA about their desires and what they would like to see for our community. It was actually released Friday and published today in the newspaper, so thank you again for that. So at this point in the meeting, we call for new business and see if anybody has anything they want to offer or say. Yes, sir.
My name's Chuck Bell. I live in Vantage Village. I'm one of the original members helping to get this CAG started. And I'm pretty much I wrote a letter or a question to the CAG asking for a motion. And I'm going to give a brief statement and ask for a motion. and a vote to be taken here tonight, so I've kind of written it down to be very brief, but a lot of it touches on kind of what Doug said here tonight. So I'm just going to go ahead and read kind of my statement. My name is Charles Bell, and my family and I are residents of Spanish Village. Like a lot of residents of Spanish Village, we feel our safety and health has been compromised. EPA Region 7 has been dragging their feet. The Attorney General has had to step in and do their job. I know it's a long shot, but the VA got it right. We need to do the same. It's time to ask for the resignation or removal of Regional Administrator Carl Brooks. The situation at Bridgeton West Lake Landfill has been going on too damn long. We need new and effective leadership that is proactive and will keep our community safe and informed. St. Louis Moms, Missouri Coalition for the Environment, the Pattonville Fire District, and others have done the research, testing, and have brought about community awareness and shared information of this dangerous situation at the landfill. Documents since 2005 have shown off-site levels of radiation that need remediation, and to our knowledge, nothing has been done. This is unacceptable. EPA Region 7 should have been proactive, not reactive to the situation, and many others that have occurred. We have no confidence in EPA Region 7. Carl Brooks has got to go, and changes have to be made. I would like to make a motion for the CAG to write a letter to the EPA and our elected officials asking for Carl Brooks' resignation or removal and the investigation of Region 7's handling of this horrible situation. Region 7, Carl Brooks, has denied, discredited, and delayed needed testing, actions, and results. Suitable is not good enough. Out now, Carl Brooks. And like I say, we're residents of Spanish Village. Our safety and health has been compromised, and we need action now, not 5 years, 10 years down the road. It needs to happen now. So I'd just like to present that resolution and hope to get a vote tonight.
Well, we have a motion on the floor. Chuck, may I ask you to please read just the motion for us again so I can get the language correct?
I would like a letter written by our CAG to the EPA and to our officials asking for the removal of Carl Brooks or his resignation, either or, and an investigation into Region 7's EPA handling of this situation.
Okay, I've gotten to or resignation. I apologize. I'm not the best note taker on the planet. So, especially when it's word for word. So, or resignation.
Or resignation.
Right, but after that, so continuing on from there.
Let me go back now.
It's not the investigation.
I'm asking for Carl Brooks' resignation removal and the investigation of Region 7's handling of this horrible situation.
All right, the first question for you, Chuck, is may I change the handling of this horrible situation to the handling of this situation?
No.
Okay. All right, a motion has been made for the CAG to write a letter to our elected officials and the EPA asking for the resignation or removal of Carl Brooks and an investigation of Region 7's handling of this horrible situation. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the first one, the hands up. All right, we do have a second, so we do have a motion on the floor. At this point in time, the way this works is a motion on the floor. The person who placed the motion is allowed to have questions, and we can make amendments to the initial motion. Those each have to take a vote. This can get to be time consuming. So the first thing we want to see is, are there any questions for the person that brought the motion to the floor? or any amendments to the motion? Okay, that looks like it's pretty popular, I'm guessing. All right, so,
Doug,
yes,
I think as far as the investigation goes, being specific about who you want to do the investigation.
okay, so investigating body of Region 7's handling of
So
this
like
horrible situation.
congressional or whoever should do the investigation.
All right, we have a suggestion to add by Congress.
Sure.
Investigation,
Yeah, that's who gets the letter.
Now, first ask the petitioner, Chuck, would you agree to add that to your? I'm sorry?
I'm good with making that change.
Just one informational thing, that on removal, I believe that's an appointed office by Congress, congressional appointed office, and if so, then the removal would have to be done through a congressional body, I would assume. Is that correct?
You got me.
You gotta start somewhere.
I think it's the president.
So we have presentations this evening, and I don't want to rush something like this. But at the same time, if we're in agreement on the language, that's the principal question here. And I'm looking for comments, questions of the petitioner. Any out there? Okay, seeing none, we can actually move this to a vote. We can do a vote in several ways. Do you have a preference, Chuck?
There are cards.
Okay, we can do a vote by show of hands. Now, it is just members, yes. Now those individuals who have a card that indicates your voting status as a member of this organization, we ask that you actually hold your card in the air when you vote, so that is proof of your status with the organization. And please keep your hand up until we have a count by our secretary. So I'm going to ask a motion on the floor for a vote for the West Lake Landfill Community Advisory Group to write a letter to our elected officials and the EPA asking for the removal of Carl Brooks or his resignation and an investigation of Region 7's handling of this horrible situation by Congress. Yes.
Are there any who are actually members who do not have a card? If so, then you just hold up your hand too. If you're an actual member, signed in as a member, but don't have a card. Hold them back up again, make sure we've got them all here.
Okay, now I'm going to call for nays. I see none. Speak now. All right, can I have a count, please? We had 14 for and no nays. The motion passes. Chuck, I would like your input at some point in the near future to draft the letter. We will bring the letter to the CAG general body for acceptance before sending it off. So we'll look to that at the next meeting on the 11th, where we'll perfect the language and consider. Okay, thank you very much. Any other new business I hesitate to ask? All righty. In that case, what we want to do is, I want to introduce you to Mike Smiley with St. Louis County Emergency Management. And he's here tonight to talk to us about the situation from their perspective and answer any questions you have about if something bad were to happen here. So Mike, I'm actually going to ask you to step up here and I'll provide you the microphone. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Mike Smiley. I'm with the St. Louis County Police Department. I'm the director of the Office of Emergency Management. So our job is to look at all risks, all hazards that may befall St. Louis County, and look at them, and then work to make sure that St. Louis County government has the wherewithal, the plans, and the means to respond to all disasters, flooding, tornadoes, hazardous material situations. So that's what we do on a regular daily basis. We work with local municipalities, we work with fire protection districts, municipal fire departments, and police departments, as well as other agencies that have a role in emergency response. So it's our job. We are not, so to speak, responders. You're not going to see myself or my staff out at midnight, out on a fire scene. But we work closely with all the first responding agencies. Primarily to make sure that before something happens, we get together, we look at the question of who's doing what, when, who's in charge at what point, what resources should be brought to bear, and those types of questions, so that when the time comes, and time is of the essence, there's not a lot of questions that are asked among the first responders as to, whose role is what, whose responsibility is what. So that's basically the mission of the office. So, needless to say, we are involved in looking at this issue as well. So we are working with the local responders and looking at what should be the appropriate response. So we work with Pattonville Fire, City of Bridgeton, St. Louis County Health Department, and we look to see who are the proper responders and what are their roles and responsibilities. So in doing that, we are in the process of constructing our contingency plan. The contingency plan is not finished, it's not a done document. So if you were to say, can I have a look at that? Certainly, you can have a look at it. We're not hiding anything, but it is not complete. So that means that you do have an opportunity to contribute to the plan. So the questions that you may have with me tonight, I may not have an answer for you, but it doesn't mean that we won't find the answer and maybe incorporate that into the plan as well. So, let's see. It might be probably just the best idea to start, asking questions and try to find out what exactly your concerns are. Sir?
Yeah, my name is Ed Smith, I work for the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. You said that we could see the plan and have input on the plan. How do we do that?
Well, we have regular meetings. We work with with other departments in the You can certainly call me at my office. You can attend meetings. You can have input through emails. You can ask questions directly of me or make suggestions. So it is, we're not trying to create something that isn't a workable plan. This has to be realistic in the sense that the first responders and the agencies that are actually doing the response have the equipment and wherewithal to do that. So, but that's a challenge for us all the time. The scarcity of resources is really a serious concern for us. That's why we incorporate a lot of agencies. We depend on mutual aid.
So if I call you, you'll send it to me?
It's not a done document. It's in draft form.
Where do I go to view it?
We don't have it up on the website, but that's what we intend to put it is on the website. We will certainly post that when it's in completed form. But if you want to see a draft, or if anybody wants to see a draft, we can make it.
We could actually email the draft out to our membership.
And that's fine. It's a public document. I work for you. So, I'm not going to tell you, no, you can't see it. It's a public document. I think the thing that kind of concerns us is when we throw a document that's not completed, it's in draft form, that may raise a lot of questions, which is okay with us. That's fine. I don't want to hedge on that.
Do you have any idea of when it will be completed? I know school starts August 11th here, and we'd really like to know what's going to happen to our kids.
Okay, and that's, so I read some of the questions that were pre-scripted for me. I didn't get a chance to see them before I got here. So I wish I had a little bit better prepared for those specific answers, or questions and have specific answers for you. But we are working with the Packville School District. One of the questions has to do with buses and evacuation, and to tell you the truth, I don't know how many buses I have. Okay, but that doesn't mean that I'll be on the phone with them pretty shortly. But I know that typically most school districts don't have, but they do buses and they ship kids in, in waves. But again, much like law enforcement and fire service resources, there's opportunity for mutual aid. So we can work with the surrounding districts to see, what are the total number of buses that are available. Problem is, sometimes reality gets in the way, and the idea of rallying buses, getting drivers, moving them to the scene, becomes a question of time and distance. So again, we want to say that we want a workable plan, something that's going to be, again, realistic and workable. So, but we are certainly going to do that.
So maybe like kind of what you were alluding to, you would start with perhaps a 2 to 3 mile radius, and only those schools that fall within that, they would be, you wouldn't respond to all schools in the area, just those closest in whatever deemed zone.
Well,
so
we
it's
look
not
at the
like
risk.
you need buses for every school.
Say that one last part.
So it's kind of not like you need buses at the same time for every school. You would kind of maybe do it in waves.
Well, what we're going to do is this. We're going to look to the school district for a lot of answers. I mean, the school district has a responsibility day to day to protect the children and, if need be, to evacuate the children away from those schools. If there's a prediction of heavy snow in the middle of the day, and they've done it before, the school districts have the responsibility to get those kids out of there. And they've done it before. So before I second guess or presume, what are the capabilities of the district, we're going to work with them and say, what are you capable of doing now? And how can we help you for this particular incident, increase your capabilities? Sir.
Yeah, as I said, I'm from Spanish Village. Spanish Village and the trailer park, we're the 2 closest communities to this landfill. We have one entrance in and one entrance out for both these communities. You're going to have our first responders coming in. We're going to be trying to get people out. We need more than lip service. We need another way out, something that's temporary or something, to be able to get out of these 2 locations that are right on top of this landfill. Like I say, it's one way in, one way out. If you've got first responders coming in, how are you going to get us out safe and time? When that above surface fire hit a few months ago, that smoke was in our neighborhood well before. And I say the first responders, fire department are fantastic, but they can get there only in so much time. And that stuff hits our neighborhoods just like that. We need to be able to get out of there. And if you have one way out and you've got over 100 residents in each of those 2 locations, it's not a good situation. Something needs to be done ahead of time and not just when it happens.
I don't have the answer.
That's what we keep getting. That's not good enough.
Well, so what I would suggest is that we go to the St. Louis County Department of Highways and Traffic, and we have them undertake a study to see, if that's feasible to put in another route in and out. I'm not arguing with you. I'm not trying to say it's a good or a bad idea. I just don't know, because I don't know the terrain. I don't know the subdivision well enough to know that you can put a road right here. There's a lot of issues.
Well, I understand, but what I'm saying is I'd like someone to look at that. I've brought this up several times, and that's what I keep getting the answer is nobody knows. Both the trailer park and the subdivision are there all the time. Someone needs to drive through and say, hey, is there somewhere we could put a temporary way of getting out of there that's not used on a permanent location, but could be used in the event of an emergency?
So that's all unincorporated things. Matt, do you know? Okay. Well, the proper way to do that would be to approach the Department of Highways and Traffic and have them look and see if there are options and opportunities to do that. So, again, I guess I'd say what I could do is I could take that forward.
I appreciate it.
I guess what I need is, I need your name and some way to get back in touch with you about what the results might be of that.
Write it down for you and give it to you after the meeting, or I can tell you right now, it's probably better to write it down and give it to you.
Okay.
What is the scope of the contingency plan, and what?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
I said, what would be the scope of the contingency plan that's being written?
Okay, that's a good question. When we looked at it and we started the plan, that's one of the things we we do is what are we planning for? And so we have to define the issue, put some parameters on there, and what we did was we were considering a surface fire on the landfill where we have visible fire, visible smoke, a plume that gets off range downwind and has a fallout situation where we have contamination downwind.
And Miss, could you identify yourself for the record?
My name is Elizabeth Alderton.
Thank you.
I'm a concerned citizen and radiation safety professional.
There was one in the back, sir.
Yeah, Harvey Burton. State of Missouri has set some trigger points and thresholds for various, mostly chemical contaminants in the air. My question is trigger points for the county to make a decision that there's a problem. Are you going to be using state levels or establishing your own levels?
I'm going to have to ask you to define that a little bit, ask that question maybe differently. I know the trigger points you're talking about as far as levels of danger to health for some of the chemicals. And if you're asking if St. Louis County has said anything differently than that?
Yeah, would you be setting your own standards or some theirs?
I know that there is someone from the health department here, but
Let me ask you more general.
Okay.
How will you establish what those thresholds are?
for the nature of the chemical danger?
For the county, for any event that the county decides requires a response, what's the process for you guys to decide what that threshold is? Obviously, chemical contamination, radiological contamination, smoke particles. I understand there's a number of things that can happen. You're probably more well versed on than I am. How are you going to decide the threshold? For example, benzene remains easier. So what source material do you use as an authority, or what department in the county, or do you defer to the state to decide what is a dangerous level of benzene before you would, which one you would trigger an action?
Okay, triggering the action is what you're getting at.
Yeah, setting the thresholds. How are you going to establish the thresholds at which you will trigger an action?
And what's the action you're looking for? An evacuation or a notice or a notification that there's danger to life?
All of the above. So
Okay.
So I'm asking what authority will you be using to determine when a threat is present at any of those reaction levels?
Okay. The way that emergency response is structured, not just in St. Louis County, but across the country, is that you have the immediate risk and you'll have response by primarily police, fire, and EMS. And at that point in time, those local responders will evaluate the situation and they will make the determination as to whether or not there's going to be a notification of the public to shelter in place or evacuate. So as far as the thresholds go, they use some pretty, I won't say rudimentary, but they use guidebooks that they have available to them by the Department of Transportation. They have other reference materials that they have available to them. And they get that information through their dispatch agencies. They carry it in reference material on their rigs. They have it available to them on their smartphones and other. And it's not so much, it's a little cruder than I think you're alluding to. There's a decision that's got to be made by a first responder, a captain on a truck that says this is dangerous stuff and we gotta waste no more time. We gotta get people notified to either shelter in place or evacuate or take some course of action. So the threshold triggers I think you're speaking of are a little cruder, a little bit broader than at that level than they are that you see when you have a meter taking a reading, on a fence line.
But they're not going to set that account?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Way back in the back.
I live in Spanish Village, and I made some comments when we were meeting about being able to use the tornado siren, or maybe make it a different sound, so that at least some of us would get a head start, other than people door to door to tell people that there's something wrong.
Right.
Is that, or would that be possible to do like a siren thing, possibly?
We are looking at various ways of notifying the population. The siren system is capable of doing that. Okay, when we implemented the siren system, there was a decision that was made before all this came up, that the sirens would be used to notify individuals of a tornado, and that there wouldn't be any other purpose for that. It does have the ability to use, to put out voice announcement, or, voice messages, which we can certainly pre-can message, we can have that available, and we can use that to give voice instruction at the time. The other question that you're asking was, can the sirens create a different tone that would indicate an emergency at the landfill? And I'm telling you that yes, it's possible.
And what do we have to do to put that, get that in place or make that a possibility, or what do we have to do?
Well, the sirens are owned by St. Louis County. That means we control that. So it would have to be a matter of going to, just making a decision that we're going to say these sirens that are in the immediate area, in the vicinity, and creating a different tone. But the problem that we're going to have, and the challenge, I should say, not a problem, the challenge we're going to have is one of education. And to say that now, when people that aren't aware, that aren't in this meeting, that have no idea, and were never told what that sound is, they're going to have a question, well, what am I supposed to do now? Well, that's my job, to make sure that as many people as possible know what that sound means. So I'm not going to tell you this, no, it's not possible, and we're not going to do it. I'm going to say we can do it. It's a challenge, and it certainly isn't going to take place overnight, because, we could make the tone, we could say we're going to use it tomorrow. The problem is people won't know what it means.
But can you put the voice one on that says?
We can certainly use the voice one tomorrow. We can create a text message or a voice message that says, attention, attention, there's been there's an emergency, right now there's within the sound of this text, whatever. However we scope that or script it, we can do that tomorrow.
Okay, so that's something people will.
Yes, so that's part of the overall notification plan that we're looking at. We're not only using the sirens to put out a voice message, but we're also looking, to back up a little bit, what we've been looking at is other means of doing that as well. There is something called a reverse 911 system. Okay, that's kind of a generic, there are various applications that we can purchase and use to call you and give you a message, a personal message, and you sign up for that. You say, here's my home phone, my cell phone, my mom's phone, my dad's phone, my next door neighbor's phone, however you want to be notified. You can sign up for this service, and we can call you up, send you a text message, send you an email, however many different emails you want. The challenge, again, is the cost of one. We don't have that right now. We don't have a 911, a reverse 911 system. We've looked into them. They are very expensive. And the other problem, even beyond the expense, is that the pace at which it makes the call. So the ones that we have looked at were just completely out of the price range that we can afford to purchase. Put out or made a call, one call every second. One call per second. So we thought, how many people really are there out there that we might want to be notifying? So we thought about it, looked at the population, looked at the businesses, looked at everyone, and we said, 10,000 people is probably realistic. And that would be those that would need to know. But as soon as we made this application public, there may be another 10,000 that would say, well, I just want to know. Even though I live in South County, I work, up in that area. So during the day, I'd like to be notified. Or my parents work there, and I live in Illinois, so if something happens, I want to know, so I want to be called too. So we were looking, I just want to give you the background, we've looked at some of this, and we've analyzed the situation and said, we're looking at 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 calls. We're talking 2, 3, 4, 5 hours to make a notification. The voice we can do.
And what's your website?
Our website is St. Louis Co. www.stlouisco.com.
I would like to know who you're actually working with at Patton School District on your plans.
Well, we wouldn't be working just with Pattonville. We'd be working with the Consolidated School. What is it? Hazelwood School District and the school districts around there. So, no, it's not the cooperating, it used to be called Cooperating School District.
So you're not specifically talking to Bentonville superintendent,
Not yet, not just yet.
because I talk to him a lot, so.
Well, I'd be happy to have you on board then.
Please call.
So I was thinking about, a lot of us not only live here, but we work around here. I work very close to the landfill, so how would we contact the businesses and the stores?
So what I would say, as we get further down the line with this contingency planning, we get more to the point where we're saying, this is going to be the plan. We're going to start a public education component of this, but more so before we go to the general public, we're going to go to the schools, the nursing homes, the businesses that are in the immediate area. And we're going to go, literally, we're going to go to them, and we're going to, as many as possible, it's going to take a while, but it's going to take them, sit down with them and describe what it is that a response might look like to that. If we can, getting back to the notification scheme, if we can somehow obtain one of these automated notification programs and contain it to those businesses and that are just in the immediate area, in other words, just don't open up to the general public, we might be able to, identify who those folks or those businesses are, especially the critical facilities, the daycares, the schools, the hospitals and the nursing homes.
You don't know which way the wind will blow.
Well, that's always a concern. I mean, that's always, but the thing is, you look at the entire area and then you react to where the situation is. Ma'am?
How long have you been working on the plan, and who's actually working on it with you, and how much time each week are you devoting to this?
Well, we've been working on this for about 2 months. And we are included the St. Louis County Health Department, first of all, the Police Department, St. Louis County Health Department, County Executive Office as far as their public information folks are concerned, Pattonville Fire Protection District, Bridgeton Police Department,
Are they
DNR.
involved in the everyday work?
Sorry?
Are they involved, who's actually sitting down every day and working on this besides you?
These agencies,
You're not talking to all of them every day.
not every day, no.
Who else over in the office with you is actually in the office with you working on this?
Well, there's one guy right there.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's mainly the two of you that are working on it each day?
No.
And reaching out?
I tell you what, if you'd like a list of individuals that are working on it, I'd have to assemble that for you.
Okay, and I thought this was started about 4 months ago. I'm surprised you only said 2 months ago.
No, it's been 2, 3.
It actually started after the surface fire occurred in the landfill.
That's
when
what I
the
thought.
urgency came from Dr. Gunn. It was actually Mike Smiley that reached out to Dr. Gunn through us to formulate the committee to sit down and bring
Thank
everybody
you,
together.
because I was I thought when I talked to someone at the landfill that something was being worked on as early as March.
Well, I've had sit-down meetings at the landfill before we started this contingency plan. And we've been
The fire
actively involved in it for a long
Our
time.
first meeting was in March.
That's what I thought. So it's more than 2 months. It's 4
Oh,
months.
I misspoke, I apologize.
Okay, and, no, I just see a lot of people that are sitting here like, this is taking a long time. And are there different layers of it you can do, to put in one by one? For example, the notification of the people that live right there. Can you do something about that right now? And then can you get to the schools? Or are you going to just do a whole plan that, like, here's the whole thing? Because when you wait for here's the whole thing.
Well, no, okay, so I guess maybe I'm a little, I guess
I'm
when
not arguing, I'm just asking.
Oh, I understand. So I guess what I'm going to do to answer the question is to say that we're not starting from zero. Okay, we're not starting from a capability level of 0. We've done a lot as far as emergency planning response, contingency planning and response for a whole host of risks to the county. Again, we've been working on hazardous materials response for 20 years. and equipping the first responders, training the first responders, exercising the first responders, working with the hospitals, teaching them how to accept patients, how to decontaminate patients, how to move patients around. We're working with EMS agencies across the state to figure out how we're going to get transport vehicles in and out of here when needed. So we've been working on this for years. This, contingency plan that speaks specifically to this episode that may occur is what we've been working on for 4 months now. So we're just taking all the expertise, all the resources, all the training, everything that we've been doing for years and years and years, and now just applying it to this. If we had to do something with it, we have a surface fire, we have something to do tonight, we could do everything that we needed to do. It's going to be necessary to be accomplished. We can do that now tonight.
My question back here too. Two things on it. One is that we had talked earlier about the possibility of you checking into the National Weather Service alert system. And you might want to mention that. Plus also, and I know the answer to this is that you are, because I used to work with the county and Red Cross and doing some emergency management plans like this. But we're talking about evacuating or notifying people to leave. Well, where are they going to go once we leave, or where are we going to go? Because I live in Spanish Village right here, and I think that's key that people need to know. Part of that planning is that you're predetermining places that people could be evacuated to, and how far away are you looking at being able to tell these people, well, you need to leave, but this is where you need to go, and how far would we need to anticipate we would be going?
Okay, so the first issue that he mentioned, I failed to mention on the notification descriptions, is that when I said we looked at these automated telephone notification systems, that would be, a high-tech solution that would give you a personal call that says, hey, there's a problem. And we found that challenge to be pretty significant. So one of the other things that we are doing is working in conjunction with the National Weather Service, which is another planning partner. And they have the capability to put out emergency alert system, EAS messages. So we have already worked with them. We've got them, much like the voice message that we would put out over the sirens. We've worked out emergency notification messages that the National Weather Service will push out over weather radios, over the EAS system, which automatically notifies and alerts all the news media, which then turns on that whole system. It also, there's a new system, relatively new system, that is part of this notification plan that allows for your cell phone, if you have a smartphone, a newer phone, that if you are within the vicinity or driving through a cell tower air zone that is in the area of the emergency, you will get a call on your cell phone. So that's nice because that now brings into the notification group those that don't live anywhere near here, that are just passing through, driving down the highway. Or they may be visiting someone from some other area and have their phone on, and now we'll be getting this emergency alert system message through the National Weather Service system. Okay.
I have a couple of comments and a question. I'm a little disappointed that it's only been 4 months that you guys have been working on this since the surface fire. I know I've been involved since January of last year, and speaking with DNR and EPA, it's been very clear that there were some significant possibilities of just endless stuff that could go wrong on this landfill that would result in it being necessary to get people out of harm's way. Why is St. Louis County just after the surface fire? I mean, is it a matter of not believing it was possible? Is it wishful thinking that people thought, my God, nothing bad will happen on this landfill? Because, after one fire, I mean, it could happen any day, and I know you say you have things in place, but this is a very complex situation. I've got 3 kids at 3 different schools. They all have special needs. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you've got people in Spanish Village that are going to go home tonight knowing that there's not a plan, and I just,
Well, what I said is, we're not starting from zero. We have resources, we have capabilities, we have trained responders, We have experience, we have practical knowledge. We are not hoping that we know what to do and confused about what it is we're going to be doing. If we have an emergency tonight, be it a surface fire or a tornado or a flood or another hazardous material spill.
You know, with the tornado, it's a good thing you brought that up. I'm sure St. Louis County is aware that the way that the tornado was handled a couple of years ago in Maryland Heights and Bridgeton was just an epic failure. You had...
So before you get too far with that, now are you suggesting that it was a failure on the part of municipal officials?
I think across the board, you had different emergency responders telling people to leave, and then others saying you're going to get arrested if you don't go back to your house. That's a pretty epic fail.
Well, again, those were decisions and orders that were given by local municipal officials,
Right.
not St. Louis County.
Well, whoever is responsible.
It's a big difference.
Well, then that doesn't put me at ease anymore with the local officials either. I mean, I get that there are things in place. My question is, we've seen when those things needed to be put in place and they didn't work so well for us, the community. So it's a very scary thought.
Mike, I need to let you know, just take the last two questions and we can move on to the presentation. Sure.
Sir.
I'd like to go back to the question the gentleman brought up about entering and exiting Spanish Village in the trailer court.
Okay.
I know there's been over the past months, maybe year, some conference calls between different municipalities and first responders, and also the people that are here from Spanish Village. If anybody has ever sat down and talked about this, that they could let us know, me and my fellow colleagues there, if they have any ideas for this. Because I think it's certainly something that we should look at, because I couldn't hear the lady's question up there, but it's something that come to my mind when we had the tornado. I live on a one-street cul-de-sac, and a tree goes down, and we have injuries in there. How are people going to get in there? So what you bring up is a very good point, and I have no idea. I used to represent Spanish Village. I wish I still did, because I'd be in there. But you got good people. And if we know about something, we can try to do something about it. But if we don't know it, we can't do it. So let us know what we can help any of you.
Whatever you do as far as the notification system, I think it would be really smart to consider a dual notification system. You have a broad range of age groups. There's people who have house phones, people who have cell phones. And I do have to tell you, when that tornado came through, I never heard of the tornado siren. My smartphone was what I had with me in my basement when I was hunkered down looking for something to cover my head.
Right.
And I can tell you, every time that smartphone has never failed. Not everyone has a smartphone. Other thing that I always know, you don't mean this as a joke or anything, our first responders are wonderful. Our fire department is wonderful. And without fail, I can tell you exactly when Santa Claus is coming for a neighborhood every year. Those fire trucks are so loud, and they do not fail. And I never heard of tornado siren. So you need to at least have a dual notification system so everyone can.
And Miss, can we get your name for the record, please?
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
My question is, what about the people who are out walking around Creve Coeur Lake or at Verizon? If something happens, what's your contingency for getting them out and notified?
So questions to the folks in the back. Can you repeat?
She repeats it to me.
Okay. What is your contingency for notifying or getting the people out around Creve Coeur Lake and at Verizon Wireless Amphitheater?
Okay. So again, the question is for those individuals that are outside, away from their home, from their televisions and radios, around Creve Coeur Park or elsewhere, anywhere outside, soccer fields, what have you, how are they supposed to get notified that there is a problem? And again, that's when we are going to be using the tornado warning sirens with a voice message, because that's really the only way that we've got to get a message out to them. That's the only way we can notify people that are away from their other means of notification that there's severe weather at foot.
But should people that walk around the lake be told to carry a mask with them? You know, because they're going to be away from their vehicles trying to get back to them if it's an airborne issue.
I guess that would be a personal choice.
Can you repeat?
She wanted to know if people should be carrying masks with them when they're outside enjoying, well, like concrete court parks.
Enjoy the air, no.
So again, I guess that would be a personal choice.
If we just limit to the next three hands that are up here, and no more hands up for this, because EPA's got a bit of a presentation for us, and then I'm sure you have some questions for them.
Okay. Sir?
Yes, my name is Anthony. My question is, so what, say, worst case scenario is call for evacuation due to migration of radiologically impacted materials from landfill? From my understanding on these particles, they're microscopic, and even one particle is damaging. So if there were to be a leak, like you said, kind of following the wind patterns, at what point would the contingency plan stop, or would there be a determination that the area was safe and people could go back, and how would that determination be made?
Okay. So if there were a surface fire with a plume,
Well, even or a surface fire or not, if there were just a plume, because it could happen without a surface fire, but if there were to be detected leak of radiologically impacted materials into the atmosphere from the landfill, how would there be determination, number one, as to where to evacuate, and then number two, when it was safe to go back to that area?
okay, so I guess what I'm going to have, the way I'm going to have to answer this question is to look at the scope of the contingency plan that they're creating, which was based on a surface fire with a plume, which would be visible, that you could track and see it, at least in the direction that it is going. So what we would do is then we'd have to take rad meters, and we'd have to go down range, we'd have to grid the whole area, and we'd have to start taking our readings to find out if we were getting readings. If that was the case, we'd have to designate it as being a contaminated area and not suitable for you to be there, so that we would have to evacuate outside that area.
And when you say rad meter, you mean like a Geiger counter?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Charles Murray. I live at the Carrollton Apartments. I wondered, you said the immediate area, would that be included in your surrounding area? Would we be included?
Say that one more time.
Would we be included, Carrollton Apartments?
Right.
Would we be included in your notification? We're about a mile, 3/10 away.
Yes, again, the notification system that we were using, the emergency alert system, is for the general public.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be targeted, like, what we'd like to do is target you,
Yeah.
but we don't have that capability,
We don't have
so.
the capability present.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am.
My name is Kate Rye. I live in University City. How would the county decide which level of radioactive gases would require, what person or program at your department would decide what the exact level of radioactive gas emissions would be that would result in the evacuation of, say, Spanish Village or the Terrace in Mobile Home Park or the Carrollton Apartments? Who would decide what the level of radioactive releases would be?
So again, what we're talking about is a surface fire with a off-site contamination from a smoke plume. At that point in time, local police and fire responders would obtain the equipment, and we don't have a lot of it. It would obtain red meters, go down range and start taking meters to see if there are these radiological readings beyond background. Now, what I would like to do is I'd like to lean on Matt here, if I could, is to help describe how it is that they, from a command and control standpoint, would make a decision whether or not there would be an evacuation order in place, or given.
So will you have that level decided when you?
We don't have that decided right now. There will be a decision made upon part of the incident commander on the scene.
You'll know though what it is soon, or is that going to be part of your plan?
If, and again, if there is a off-site contamination, we're talking about radiological, and they use these radiological meters to start getting readings over background. You can see in others, as far as the reading levels go, and he can tell you more so about than I can.
Yeah, first of all, Mike is our administrator who does the organization of not only the hazmat team, but many other teams in St. Louis County. Me being the hazmat commander, Mike's administrative, I'm technical. So the answer to that is going to be, and everybody knows this, any amount of radiation above background is not good. But it doesn't mean that it requires an immediate evacuation. The thing that we have to rely on are the documents that are out there, and I know some people feel that those are flawed or incomplete. But the fact is that it's low-level radiation, gamma, alpha, and beta radiation that we're dealing with. In some of those cases, decontamination of equipment, personal people that might be exposed to that are as simple as brushing them off and getting the alpha component off of them. It may be a hasty shower decon, something like that. But the problem is like Mike says, is there's not a whole lot of equipment in the area. We have reached out to the National Guard for assistance with helping formulate the plan, helping educate the hazmat technicians that work underneath me on any scene. But we're having some difficulty in getting that done, but we believe that the wheels are moving in the right direction at this point. But one of the first calls that I would make, and going back to some of the other questions that I've heard, nobody said that there's only going to be one means of notification. As soon as we know that there's an issue with surface fire, we had a surface fire. There was not any radioactive material associated with the plume of smoke that was generated from that. In the event that we have a fire that produces radioactive material being airborne into the wind or whatever it is, we will then notify those agencies. Mike would be one of the first phone calls that I make, because like you said, he's not out there, he's not a responder, that's me. He will get us the equipment, he will make the formal request to SEMA, which is the State Emergency Management Association. There would be a statewide response. It would be a response that would call in the National Guard because they are the experts when it comes to radiological monitoring. But if we determine that there's contaminated areas in that 1.5 or 2 mile area, whatever it is that's deemed to be the initial evacuation area, and I'm going to tell folks right off the bat, evacuation to me is a bad word. If we don't have to evacuate, I'm not going to risk the hundreds of lives just at DePaul Hospital. The people that are tied to electrical equipment saying we got to get them out of here now without the means to do it properly. So evacuation is a bad word, especially when you're dealing with radioactive, low-level radioactive waste. It doesn't mean that you only have 15 minutes or you're going to die. In our line of work, radioactive material exposure is based on time, distance, and shielding. The amount of time that you're exposed to it, the type of shielding you have, and this uniform right here for alpha emission is more than ample to protect me from alpha emissions. The only way that I could get that, if there were levels high enough, if I inhaled it or ingested it. But we're going to be monitoring that, and we already have monitors set up in the area that are doing that constant monitoring now. So if that happens, we are going to have that technical data to tell us whether or not an area that downwind is being exposed to radioactive material. But that'll be through the police department originally. It'll be me telling the police chief at Bridgeton, you need to bring in as much assistance through a Code 1000 or whatever it is that they do to get into the neighborhoods on their bullhorns and their speakers and everything else and tell the people that there's an issue. So I hope that answers some of those questions, but Mike's not the guy and Mark's not the guy that responds to that. They react based on what our incident command officers tell them they need immediately. I see there's a hand up.
Well, actually, we need to cut off questions now. I'm sorry, I apologize, but we've got still another presentation to go through.
I actually want to thank everybody from and I think that we'd like to invite you back at some point in the near future to follow up on some of these questions and hopefully be able to present us with the final contingency plan. All right, thank you. All right, now we've got EPA is going to present. I don't know what format they're using. I believe there's a projector involved and you're going to work from the projector?
Well, here, let's get it running here.
All right. You guys run.
Do you want me to use the mic for? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 3. Some people be trying to get you much more. That's what it's. All right, that's about all you got. That's all right. So we're going to consider we can do that too.
Can everyone see the screen okay? Hear me all right? All right. My name is Todd Campbell. I'm a federal on-scene coordinator with US EPA Region 7 out of Kansas City. And my responsibility was to pull together the project that involved the BMAC sampling and the analysis, put together the team and conduct the investigation. The investigation occurred pretty much, I think we started the 19th of May, finished up that week, took pretty much all week to do that. Briefly, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about kind of people that we had on site and supporting this investigation. We had people from Kansas City, people from Chicago, we had certified health physicists, nuclear engineers, PhD statisticians, environmental scientists. So, we had a fairly robust cadre of people that were involved in this investigation. So, this is pretty much a two-part investigation. The first part is the gamma screening, and that was what we talked about, or I guess a lot of it was what was mentioned in the letter, was the gamma screening. That would have been, at the same time, we also collected soil samples, and there will be a second part of this report that will involve the data that came from the soil sample analysis. We deployed 3 FAST survey teams, stands for field analysis and sampling. Basically, what it is, and you're going to see the picture here in a second, you'll be like, wow, that's really low tech. But what it is a laptop computer, a radiation monitor, and a GIS or a GPS system, all tied together, strapped to a baby buggy, and that is pushed along in a grid pattern in an area, and it takes a reading approximately every 1 to 2 seconds, and it links that reading from the radiation monitor with the satellite signal it's getting, and it links those two up into a database on the computer. That's what we use to look at this data. So as mentioned in the letter, roughly 716 gamma readings collected at BMAC. We also looked at Koch and Blanchette parks as reference areas. We walked approximately 45 miles of transects that week, and we looked at multiple site areas, included soil or infield areas on the baseball fields, grassy areas that included outfields at the ballparks, soccer fields, just open grassy areas, drainage areas, and then improved surfaces such as the parking lots made out of concrete and asphalt. So there you go. Like I said, it looks kind of low tech. The Rubbermaid containers were just to block the light so you could actually read the laptops when you were standing there in full sunlight. Otherwise, if anybody's ever tried to look at their computer or their phone in sunlight, you can't see the screen. Like I said, I mentioned the team. So we had 5 EPA people on site that week. 4 EPA people on site, and we had 3 additional contractors that worked for us. These 3 Ludlam radiation meters were calibrated at a laboratory the week before we went out there in Chicago. And then every morning and again every evening, they were functionally checked against a known source of radiation in our job trailer, which is located over there off of Tossigton. And so that's just a photo of how those were checked. Cesium-137 was the source material used. So to get into the screening, we said we used Coke, Blanchette. We chose those 2 areas because they were located approximately 4 miles in either direction. The usage was very similar to BMAC. They included park, public use areas, baseball fields. Some of them had walking tracks. So we wanted to try to find, similar usage areas and have them to be spread out so that, they weren't both located directly downwind or directly upwind, et cetera, and so forth. So when I said that you pretty much push the baby carriage in a transect pattern, it's exactly what they did. We walked roughly 3 meters apart, or 10 feet, and walked back and forth, just like you would mow your lawn. So this is Coke. You can see we did the baseball field. We also did an open grass area. Each of those green dots represents a reading taken from that particular unit. And I also failed to mention that all 3 of the units were tracked one behind the other the first day of the survey. And so we had data sets from each of those 3 units in the exact area, and then we went back and standardized those readings so that we knew we were getting like readings from each of the 3 fast survey units. So that's Coke. Tom. Sorry. Blanchette, same thing. This is a picture of the guys walking a grassed area at Blanchette Park. And there is the data points that were collected at Blanchette. So we move on to BMAC, which obviously was much larger. It was a much larger area. It's approximately 70 acres, depending on who you ask. And like we said, we collected roughly 58,000 data points at BMAC. So each of those blue dots there represents a reading from one of the fast units. The only place that we did not collect data, obviously, is the pond. And, the structures, what you see there are pretty much roofs over concession stand areas, the administration building, et cetera, and so forth. But if we could walk over it, we pretty much collected a reading. So this is a statistical look at the data points from the facility. There's 3 colors there. There are 3 colors there. They don't show up really well. But what you're looking at is a light green, a medium green, and a blue. And what that essentially represents are, if you look at the mean of all the results, you're looking at a standard deviation from the mean above and a standard deviation below, and those are your 3 colors essentially. So, we calculated an average or a mean from each of the areas, and we looked at grass and exposed soil. We didn't do that. We did not take improved surface readings at Coke or Blanchette because they were obviously the lowest readings we got. So we were really more concerned looking at the grassed areas and the exposed soil areas because they gave the higher signature gamma response. So, looking at a mean from BMAC, approximately, and these are counts per minute. So that unit is picking up counts per minute. We had an average of 22,444. We had a high of roughly 30,300 and a low of roughly 10,000. And I think the reason that those lows at BMAC were lower than they are at Coke and Blanchette are because we had some of those improved surface areas And so when you're pushing that meter, as you approach the end of a grassy area to the parking lot, you will, sometimes there's a slight lag in when that recording is picked up on the computer. So you may have had some areas where, the computer thought it was still on grass, but it was actually, a foot or so over into a parking lot, so that'll give a lower reading. What we used as a sort of an action level when we looked at this data is twice background. So when we talked about, give me just a second.
We'll hold questions to the end of the presentation.
So we looked at twice background. So if you look at your mean reference value from each, and again, we're looking at BMAC, Koch, and Blanchett, grass and soil. So we got 6 different data sets here. The mean reference values are on the right, and you can see they range anywhere from in the low 22,000s to 25,700. And then the highest reading from each of those are over here, and we did not see anything that even approached twice background. So after we did the gamma screening using the radiation monitors, we went back and looked at the data, and we picked areas to collect composite soil samples. And we based that on, we wanted half of them above the mean, half of them from areas that were below the mean. And so you can see from Koch and Blanchett, we collected, there's 12 composite samples from each park, 6 from the dirt, 6 from the grass. This is BMAC. Each of the squares represent a 10 by 10 grid where we collected a composite sample. You can see that there are some of them within the dirt area, the infield dirt areas, the rest of them from the grassy areas. These orange dots with the black center represent a data set that we got from Dawn. Dawn sent us GPS locations of the areas where the moms group collected samples. So we dropped those into the computer, it plotted a dot on the map, and then we navigated back and tried to collect a sample as close as we could to the same location that the moms group sampled. Remember, there's a little bit of plus or minus when you're looking at satellite stuff, but they're usually accurate within 10 to 15 feet. And then the triangles you see represent what we call drainage area samples. So those fields have subterranean drainage underneath them. They're designed for water to run through them and for them to dry quickly so that they can play softball games after it rains, or as soon as possible after it rains. And so each of these areas represented kind of a drainage depositional area that might have drained from the fields. And so we took, those were not composites, those were discrete grab samples at those locations, as well as those that were the moms group sample. And those samples were sent off to the laboratory, and they were, go ahead. And these are the radionuclides that will be reported in the data results from the lab. And these are both from alpha and gamma spectrometry, and these represent the uranium and thorium decay chain. And I'm not going to read them to you, but you're welcome to it. But I did want to point out that the lead-210 is on here. So, really what I wanted to do is just explain to you, what we did at BMAC as an agency and as a team. Explain to you how we took our samples, or where we took our samples, and you need to know that it's kind of a two-part investigation. The first part was the screening level data. The second part will be the data analysis, and that information is currently undergoing QA/QC and peer review, and that should be released hopefully by the end of the month. And now other questions? You want to read it?
Well, do you want to do Q&A on these?
That's up to you.
No, it's perfectly fine. I'll leave the microphone with you. I know that Dan needs to get up here also with responses to the other questions. Do we have questions concerning BMAC here? Please.
Dan, would you want to do QA on this first and then follow up with your response, or do you want to, what's going to work best for you?
I think while it's fresh in people's minds, it would make sense to do a separate Q&A on your presentation.
Okay. Ma'am.
You did the testing at BMAC and Coke and Blanchett. You are going to give out a reading to all of us. That's one reading right there, right?
This is the,
Has-
there will be a reading for each of these radionuclides.
Okay, now, have you tested inside the stay out fence line of the West Lake Landfill to get a reading on that so that you can compare it?
I have not done any work at West Lake Landfill. I mean, they brought me in just solely to look at the ball fields. So I do know that there are many other people that are working on West Lake Landfill, and there's been multiple samples collected from the landfill, so that data should be available. But I mean...
Would you put your report next to their report so that we can
So we can compare
Yes.
the levels?
Yes.
You know, that's certainly something
Don't
that
give
we
us
can...
one thing if you don't give us what we're comparing it to.
Well, for the purposes of this study, the comparison was to compare the BMAC with Coke and Blanchett Park, not necessarily to compare it to the landfill. But the data sets should be similar. I mean, I don't want to step outside of my bounds because, like I said, I do not work on the West Lake Landfill project, and so I really, I can't speak in certain terms for it. But that's something that I can certainly take back, and we can ask those questions and see what data is available and look at how it compares to what we found at BMAC. I don't think that's something that would be a problem.
Thanks.
Not to be rude, the gentleman in the back did have his hand up first, but I'll come back to you, I swear.
Thank you. There's a long history of hand projects and other medical research and other sources for radioactive in this general vicinity. So I'm curious on the numbers that you gave earlier, 10,000, 30,000.
I'll try to repeat it.
10,000, 30,000, those kinds of numbers. What would we see in another city? What would we see outside in the parking lot in front of the EPA office in Kansas City, for example? So if we have examples of numbers from other cities to help put those numbers into perspective.
Well, as I said, it's a two-part investigation. So the actual laboratory analysis will come back and show one way or the other whether or not these counts per minute levels that we collected at the two parks and also at BMAC, how they compare with other levels that we know of. But these, you remember, these are all reported in picocuries per gram, not counts per minute. And they're not, it's counts per minute is a screening level measurement. And so what we have when we get the actual data back, and then we can compare those to risk levels and other levels that are published out there. It counts per minute is, like I said, we use it to screen, and the rule of thumb is, if a level comes back at twice background, then we would probably do further investigation.
Right, so what I'm trying to understand is what would a typical background be somewhere else?
We've done similar studies in other areas, and every area has a different background level. It depends on what's in the soil, it depends on what rocks and substrates are underneath there, it depends on, for instance, this area has been drained for millions of years by the big river, and so every area has a different background level. They're not all, it's not apples to apples to apples to apples.
Okay, well, just help me understand the equipment that was used. Where can I find a study that is published that used that same equipment at a different site so I can get some feeling for what kind of numbers that equipment normally reports.
Tom,
The counter is going to be in the 50s or the 40s or the 30s, typically if I have one in the room. So I have some feeling for what that is. When I see a 10,000 or 30,000, I don't know what to relate that to. I have no anchor to tie that to other than that's what reading is. It just mean that the marks in this area is lower than the national average, higher than the national average. I'd like to, where can I find the source of where that equipment has been used in another study where I can see what kind of numbers another location has that?
okay, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Tom Mailer. Tom is one of our nuclear engineers, and he's here to address, specific technical questions such as that. So I'm going to let him answer this, and then we'll take the next question.
Okay, so it's a tough question to answer directly because, like Todd said, background is different, and that particular piece of equipment is highly sensitive to small changes in background. Now, that's a Ludlam detector and a Ludlam probe. That information as far as its sensitivity, approximately how many counts equate to other things like microarc per hour, that's all things that they publish. So you can go to Ludlam's website and look at that. However, that's all caveated by the fact that because this device picks up gamma radiation over a large energy range, and the efficiency that the device can detect changes based on that energy range, all of that is approximate, which is why we do additional investigation whenever we whenever we investigate a site that has radioactive contaminants. The sodium iodide detector is more of a tool to point us in the direction of where there may be contamination. And so those previous pictures that you saw, the whole method by which we decided where to collect the samples at BMAC was all based on very small changes in the readings from those gamma, from that sodium iodide detector. So, like Todd was saying before, we split the site up into 10 by 10 grids that were below the mean and above the mean. And we took samples from the areas that we found that had the highest and the areas that we found that had the lowest to tell us, one, yes, what radioactive contaminants are in the soil, but two, to verify that probe was working. In other words, if we find relatively low, and we're talking like tens of picocuries per gram, concentrations of some radionuclides from our low grids and slightly higher from our high grids, it's another piece of evidence that shows, one, that the piece of equipment works and that it can detect things at the levels that we're hoping that it can. But that's in addition to, like I said, you can go to Ludlam and look at their published sensitivities. There's a lot of data available about this piece of equipment as far as it being relative for this use. We at Region 7 have used it for, since I've been at EPA in 2011, 10 different radioactive contaminant type sites. It's part of the normal procedure. It's widely used. But again, it's only part of the picture. It doesn't answer questions about specific radionuclides. It can be used for gamma exposure, but our investigation was to find areas that may have elevated levels of specific radionuclides. So that's what it was used for, and that's what those results.
So when will the soil test be available?
Well, like Todd said, we hope to have the final report out by the end of the month. We're working on it now. So,
Harvey had asked earlier about comparison cities. You said that there were 10 or 11 sites you use this machine on. Can you think of the name of any of
Sure.
those sites?
you can.
Yeah, we've used it extensively in Wichita, Kansas. Okay. Right here.
Okay, I just have a quick question. Whose final decision was it to choose Coke Park?
We chose Coke and Blanchette, and when I say we, the team got together and we looked at, parks in close proximity to BMAC that were far enough away that they shouldn't have been directly impacted, but yet not so far away that we would expect natural changes in the radiation levels. So we chose
Who
Coke.
actually chose? Who?
The team.
Kansas City?
Yes.
Do you understand that Coke Park is part of North St. Louis County? That is having its own contamination problem, so you chose a park in the vicinity? of
Blanchett's
Suffolk?
also on a haul route to.
It's a haul route, so you guys kind of didn't really do your research on that when you chose a park? That's frustrating.
It casts some doubt, I'll just say this, it casts some doubt that those parks were chosen for background when there is a high probability that they also would have higher than background in.
And, Don brought that up when we were there, and we talked about it, and that's why when we added, we picked 2 reference areas at that point, so that we would have 2 areas to compare to. And the answer is that the topic data was collected at all 3 locations. And so when we have the final QA done on this data, then we should be able to make direct comparisons between all 3 locations and also have risk-based levels associated with that and not just counts per minute data. Does that answer the question?
No, because I didn't tell me who chose. You're saying Kansas City. Was it Dan? Did Dan choose?
I don't believe Dan was involved in that selection whatsoever. We made that selection, we were standing out there at BMAC looking at maps and...
I don't understand how you guys were not informed of Coldwater Creek and all of the contamination of North St. Louis County. They chose a park in that area. I don't understand that.
What was the question again?
Was there anyone from St. Louis Food Traffic involved in that decision? Because they would know if that area had potential contamination or not, and we would park.
No, we made that determination as a site unit when we were here in St. Louis. We went around and looked at parks, and we were looking mainly based on usage. We wanted to make sure we found parks that had baseball fields, parks that had walking tracks, and parks that had open grassy areas, so we could make comparisons between those 3 types of strata.
Think of that. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. There's a lot of parks around here that you shouldn't go to. I just don't understand why that wasn't even thought of.
Well, like I said, we discussed it. Don brought that up brought it to our attention. Yes. And so we picked 2. We picked the one that you guys had concerns over, and then we picked an additional one. And now we'll have a data set from all 3 that we can look at. Isotopic analysis, not just counts per minute. We'll actually have the soil samples that we can look at that have gone through QA/QC and have been analyzed by the laboratory. And then we can compare those numbers back to risk-based standards. So I'm not going to make a judgment on what condition the parks are in, but what we should be able to do is tell you at the end of, we get this data analyzed, whether or not these numbers from BMAC, the numbers from Coke, and the numbers from Blanchette are in, whether they exceed health-based standards, or our remediation goals, our PRGs, and other values that we use to compare that stuff to. But we'll use those same values to look at all 3 of those areas that we took the samples from.
So Coke Park might be in trouble too now. Tested it. And that's just another whole big
He had a follow-up question in the back, I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. Ma'am. Part 1 versus part 2?
No, this whole presentation, what does it mean?
Well, they asked me to come here and explain to everyone what we did when we went on site as far as the screening process went and how we selected our soil samples. And so that's what, this was really an informational presentation so that you all that weren't there when we were out there knew exactly what we did when we were on site.
Okay, and one of these numbers was submitted, you don't know what rate.
She's asking about the numbers on the screen.
What is this, what is it you're trying to tell us, that is this bad, is it good, is it something?
These are simply, you talking about that slide that was just there?
No, this whole presentation, what are we supposed to get out of this?
Well, as Tom just said, and Tom probably did a better job saying it than I did, that the initial gamma screening, okay, the baby buggies that we pushed, that is used as an indicator to tell us whether or not we have areas of contamination that we should, and I don't even want to say that we should be concerned about. It just tells, it doesn't care. That instrument doesn't care what that level is, where that line is. It's taking a reading every 1 to 2 seconds as I push that baby carriage back and forth. And it's popping that, it's taking that reading, and it doesn't care if it's 1,000 or if it's 200,000. It's going to take that reading. And so when we get back and we drop that in here onto a Google Earth image or an aerial photograph or whatever, it shows the difference in each of those readings.
And so how are we supposed to know what that means?
Well, the second part of the study, which is going to be due out at the end of the month, is the use of this information to prioritize where we wanted to take the samples. And then those samples, after they've gone through the analysis and the quality assurance and the quality control and the peer review by all the health physicists and the health experts at EPA, then those numbers, which, like I said, we should have within the next 2 weeks, will tell us whether or not we have levels of concern at BMAC Park that exceed any health-based standards or remedial action goals or there are all kinds of numbers out there, and we're looking at several different sets that would help put that into context. That we would, these are just screening level numbers, and like I said, the rule of thumb when you're doing screening level numbers like that is twice paragraph. And we didn't find anything above twice paragraph out there.
On the surface.
Well, but that's not a definition.
It's a surface sample, that's correct. All right, I'm losing track of who had their hand up first, so I think right here. You want to help me with that? Who?
No, actually, it wasn't Don. It was right here, and then Lynn, right straight in front of you, 4 rows back.
Right here? Ma'am, I'm sorry.
Smiling at you. Yep.
Yes.
I want to offer a metaphor, and it may be a bad one, but I think part of the frustration getting to the reference level is this. If you said that it was unhealthy to live in thin air compared to not thin air, and you lived in Denver, which is a mile high, and so you were going to check the air to see, if it's a problem, because people are always wondering about what makes people sick, and that's a hard thing to do because it's exposure over time. So part of the problem that gets to this issue of reference levels is if you pick 3 spots in Denver, one that's a little higher than the other ones, and then you try to say, what's higher than background level in order to assign blame to a pile of stuff that may be radiating out and making you sick, as opposed to just the general health effects over time of making people sick. So you have background level plus additional bad stuff. But if you're measuring always 3 places in Denver, or maybe another place that's 2,000 miles high, 2,000 feet high, and we're told there's never really a sea level. Okay, we understand that, but we want a place that's maybe 500 feet high, as a reference, in addition to the ones that are at the background level there. So I think when Harvey's asking about somewhere across the state or somewhere else, is can you give us a 500-foot comparison as well, using the same equipment because there are calibration issues? Now, is that a fair metaphor if thin air meets a stick in time?
And I've got two responses. One, correct me if I'm wrong, Missouri Department of Ag may have some background data. We've been discussing this, and there's been several answers go back and forth, and I'm not sure where we finally wound up on this, but there are, I guess, to be less specific, there are some data sets available that have other readings from around the country, so that information is available. It's not with our instrument at that particular time, but since this all went to the lab, and we're going to have good QA lab data, we should be able to make some comparisons to other levels around the country. And that's, we talked about these, our PRGs, our remediation goals, or our health-based risk levels, or, the action levels in the rod, or, whatever you want to use. Those levels are not specific. I mean, there isn't one just for St. Louis, or just one for Kansas City, or just one for, Boston, Massachusetts. Those levels are kind of, they try to take a lot of this variability out, and they try to set a level that we can use just about anywhere. That's not to say that there's not site-specific risk levels that we calculated for a particular area in a particular time, because that's possible too. But what we're looking at least right now, this is not the right slide, but this is the counts per minute. But with the QA lab data that we should have in our next report, we should be able to look at other levels from around the country and the levels at the three areas we sampled.
Yeah, you understand that what I'm saying though is that the body accepting the radiation is already getting more if the background levels are high. And a little higher from this problem and that problem and that problem. So the other issue isn't just a comparative in a general area that has high background levels. It's also, well, let's compare that. We've already got an additional load. And I'm just saying, I'm just offering that up as a way to grasp what I think Harvey is asking for in those other reference levels. And those aren't normally bound together in the same reports. So therefore, it's difficult, and then they get dismissed as being comparing apples and oranges. So I understand comparison within areas and background levels and the usage of the park and all of that. It's just that the other part seems to get left out, which is the load of background level.
Over to your left and then Don.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. You're supposed to be trying to explain this to us, and if I remember correctly, the first slide showed credentials of everyone that was there, and I'd seen like 11, 12 years experience and everything. But then whenever you told about the highs and the lows, how, we must have ran over concrete or something. With that experience, we know that's going to make that low, which is going to skew the average. Why would you just make sure you didn't hit any of the concrete?
Because we walked fence line to fence line. Well, there are no fences there, but we walked from property line to property line. And so when you do that in straight lines, going back and forth, you have to cross from one to the other, to the other, to the other.
But I've been on the other parts where you've done it too, and I don't see any lows like that anywhere on the other two parts, and they have roadways, sidewalks and everything going through them, just as BMAC does.
But if you, Tom, could you put that two-table slide back up, the counts per minute?
I'm just a little confused why we wouldn't avoid those.
Well,
to get a more accurate reading.
We didn't avoid them because we promised that we would look at we would walk all areas of the park. So that's why we didn't avoid the concrete and the asphalt, okay? Because that's what we were told needed to be done. Fence line to fence line, I believe was that quote. But what we did, you'll notice that we actually split this out between grass covered areas and exposed soil areas. So Tom, if you'll could you put the
one of the dot maps back up? So we had our GIS people go in here, and they actually went in and cut out all the readings that were on those concrete areas and didn't include that. To the next slide. So those were intentionally cut out of those areas. But what I said was, there may be a few, that's why we're looking at this 10,000 and this 11,000 BMAC, because we didn't do those asphalt areas at the two parks. Okay? There may be a few of those in
That's not
there.
comparing apples to apples.
It's 57,000 data points. Having even several hundred of them that might have been a foot or two off, because, you know, human beings go in and make these determinations. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you that there's not any points in that 57,000 that didn't come off of an asphalt area, but I can tell you there's not a whole bunch of them. And I can also tell you that when you're looking at 57,000 points, that if you've got even 1,000, that's not enough to move that. I mean, it's an average, it's a mathematical mean. It's not enough to shove that one way or the other to make it come out twice back. And also, you're talking about mean versus median?
No. There's an important distinction to make here. All of these results that we're talking about that may not be part of the grass or part of the soil areas, they're all going to be lower than the average for that area, which is why BMAC has lows that are different than the parks. Okay, so the important distinction here is what that does, even though it's only a very small amount, because like Todd said, it's maybe 100 data points out of thousands. It's going to lower that mean. And we're looking for results that are higher than the mean. So the lower that mean gets set is almost, it's making the investigation more conservative. So I just want to point this out here that we know that there are some low values in here, but we're not concerned that they're in there, one, because they're so few, and two, because lowering the mean would make comparing the mean to the high look even worse. So what we're saying is we recognize that this table sort of shows a number that is much lower compared to the background areas, and we wanted to give a reason for that. But the outcome of it is a more conservative mean, a mean that if we had levels that were twice the mean, those levels would be at a value that would be lower had we not had those improved surface data points. So yes, we realize that they're in there, but their presence is only making the level that we compare what we would consider needing additional investigation lower. So that's all I have.
Okay, let me interrupt here real quick. We are technically at time for our meeting. I'm happy to continue with this QA session for a little while if everybody else is. Dan, you have responses to questions we've submitted. I'm happy to take those responses via email if you would like and disseminate them to the membership.
Yeah, when we looked at the agenda for tonight, we suspected with the agenda being pretty packed that we might run out of time and I wouldn't have time to do my little fireside chat and read off the questions and the answers like I have the past few meetings. We were not expecting to see basically a resolution for a vote of no confidence in our RA, and that did take some time. But in any case, I'm handing to Doug a written copy of the answers to the questions the CAG posed, including the last one that was submitted a little bit later that they came from Harvey. That's also answered in there. And one of those questions indicated an interest in seeing the comment letter that EPA wrote on the draft isolation barrier work plan. So I'm handing to Doug a copy of the letter that we sent to the PRPs with our comments and the Corps of Engineer comments on the draft isolation barrier work plan, and you can disseminate those as you see fit.
Thank you very much.
And I will leave it to you to decide how best to use the rest of the time here. I do want to tell you, though, that the EPA folks need to leave at 9.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. We will distribute these to our email list, so if you are still interested in being on our email list and you're not, please feel free to sign up with us. I'm going to allow questions to the degree that people wish to participate here. We will end with your Q&A, so I'll let you go until you're comfortable. Is that okay? Okay, so we have till 9 p.m. before they're off the clock, folks.
Okay. I know Dawn's had her hand up for a long time, so look, Dawn.
I just wanted to say, you know, for me, and I think for a lot of people in the room, it's great that you're doing a soil test, but I think our issue, and I know one person, you mentioned that with these levels, really what you look at is twice background.
For screening
For
purposes.
screening purposes. You know, as a mom, don't I get to make a decision on whether or not I want my kids to be there, if it's even a little bit above background? Because based on what the regional director stated, there's no indication that there's a problem at BMAC based on the fact that it's not double background. As a mom, that's not okay with me. You know what I'm saying? We're not looking at, I think, enormous levels of contamination off-site. You know, I trust that that would have picked up a spill inside the plant or something like that. We're asking as parents, is there anything on that ball field above a background level, yes or no? And, you know, we were perfectly content to wait for the soil samples. It's just, I guess, in order to, I'm not really sure why, you guys, you know, because you're being very clear here. I appreciate that, being very clear here that this is just screening and that this really is, you know, the real answer is going to be with the soil samples. You weren't so clear to the media a couple of weeks ago with that. You know, and it doesn't. There's two city councils sitting here, you know, they've got a ball field that they had fireworks on. People had their kids there based on the fact that the regional director said it was okay. If those soil samples come back above background but below remediation level, you're going to have some very angry people. It's, you know, that's what we're asking. That's what we want. We just want to be able to look at numbers and make a decision. You know, and especially because a lot of these people are from North County and they grew up around Coldwater Creek. Janelle, stand up and say it, because I know what you're going to say.
Well, I would like to understand the selection process of Cove Park. Because Cove Park is in the heart of Florissant, where Coldwater Creek groundwater is contaminated. With our maps, I know our community probably seen our maps. The first people who grew up, lived in those homes, and reported to us. Every house has cancer, birth defects, automobiles. Every house. I'm the collector of the data, and I help with those maps. And for you to say that Cove Park is, if I'm understanding right, that's just be a benchmark or else I feel comfortable. Look at what's happened in every house near Cove Park. And you're trying to give comfort to people in this region that this should give them some comfort. I'm trying to understand, it's difficult to hear in the back of the room, but who selected Cove Park as some kind of comfort level, knowing the groundwater is parts of the entire area, when we have an unrated device that we're trying to clean up, remediating from Coldwater Creek, why would that be selected?
We were looking for areas that had similar land usage and similar public usage as BMAC, so we selected Cove Park, and then we also looked at Blanchette Park, which is 8 miles to the west, approximately, of Cove Park.
I just, we want to warn ahead of time, we want to be part of this process. It's very, you could have found another place besides Cove Park, and it just would have, I know, we'll see with the soil samples, but it would have really boosted the confidence in this agency that, believe it or not, we like to be able to feel confident. I mean, you know, you're kind of sinking your own ship here, and it's frustrating.
Right here, she's had her hand up for a long time.
You have the 30,000 counts per minute is twice background?
No, 30,000 pounds per minute was the highest reading we got the day we were doing, or the week that we were doing.
30,000 counts per minute?
Was the 30,300, I believe it was.
Yep.
Was the highest reading that we got the week we were out at BMAC.
Okay, what do you think background is?
Background is the average that we
You know, what is
collected.
background for that, for this part of St. Louis County?
Well, in counts per minute, I can't tell you. I can tell you that
Well,
on
I
two reference
understand
locations.
it's more like 20 counts per minute, and you've got 30,000 counts per minute.
I think we're talking two different things. Because I don't, when you say 20 counts per minute, I'm not sure, and I'm going to defer to Tom here. Different instruments.
So that's the trouble with
Gamma,
counting.
wasn't it? Gamma radiation you were testing?
All this is gamma, yes.
Yeah, and I understood, I mean, I've heard other numbers, but at the most, I've heard 20 counts per minute is in natural background.
So here's what any of those levels would be followed with. If you had someone reporting a value that said background is 20 counts per minute, they would also say that the measurement was taken with this particular device. Because a count is just a register of voltage on a machine. It doesn't directly equate to an amount of gamma, a certain isotope, an energy. And so that's why we've qualified this data as screening. Now, what I would say a background would be for this area are very similar to the means that we found at Blanchette, Koch, BMAC. I would say you could go to your park down in, I think it was suggested while we were there that we go 15 or 19 miles to the south and take background at Cliff Cave Park, which we talked about. But again, we run into a problem where if not only do we want to find similar use, but if we go to an area too far away, then you can't validate that the levels that you're picking up there are going to equate to the levels that you pick up in your investigation area.
If you understand what $1.7 billion of cleanup means, it's been spread across a large geographic area in this neighborhood.
And part of that we're able to benefit from because...
But he just said he didn't check with Bruce Rapp. I'm sorry to be a little upset about this, but you guys are going to hang your hat on Cove Park in background. There's going to be an issue here because it is not a clean area and it has not been shown to be a clean area. There are cancerous clusters around it. This is not, and you were told, Dawn said she was up there that day, I was out of town. But Dawn and Doug, I believe, were up there that day, and they told you guys that was not a good background site. And yet you insisted on using it, so.
As part of the background investigation.
But as soon as you put the term background and Cove Park together, you have a problem.
Right.
This is working all in that area. There are cancer clusters that are reported in that area. I don't understand how you can use that as background.
Well, the idea by having multiple background areas was that if for some reason one area was at higher levels than the other, then yes, that would indicate to us that we can't use Koch Park as a background area. That's why we took multiple.
Is it real clear that Blanchard up there?
The overland gamma readings are what they are. The real issues, the real data, I think you guys have indicated this, are the soil samples that the really going to show us in units that we all understand, in picoperiod per gram that we're used to seeing. I assume you're going to publish that, you're going to publish the actual hard data, you didn't measure background levels. You're not going to show us X amount above background, you're going to show us the hard readings that come out of those soil samples.
That is correct.
Okay, I look forward to that day, and I think the rest of this is, we can argue all day, you know, getting over.
Okay.
I've got an easy question.
Okay.
The level of detectors you use, I looked through, at least for West Lake, they're in the work plan, it talks about the level being used for overland gamma surveying. I've been on the Loveland website, I've had interns contact equipment being used. We haven't heard back from them, maybe you guys can help me out. At what depth does that level of equipment detect gamma radiation? Some of the stuff I've heard about previously is about 12 inches of diminishing returns the deeper you go. So can you give us an idea about what depth and so forth?
The reason you probably haven't gotten an official answer to that question is because, again, with radiation, you have to ask the question as a specific isotope, because like I've already mentioned, this particular level that we used responds to different energy levels at different efficiencies. So the ability for the detector to see radioactive components underground is dependent on, one, the amount that you have, and two, which isotope you're talking about. So it's not a question that you can just say, you can see radiation at 6 inches under the ground. Now, there will be a limit at some point where even if you had a very high source of radiation, if you had enough feet of soil as shielding, then you wouldn't see that. But again, assigning one depth to this piece of equipment is a complicated answer because it depends on which isotope you're trying to investigate and at what levels you expect to find it.
But wouldn't any gamma emitting radioisotope, the equipment you're using wasn't to find a specific isotope?
That's correct.
It was to look for gamma emitting radioactive isotopes. So
Right.
is there like a range that for like the soils you're on a grassy ball field? Is there a general range that you could provide? I'm curious equally about West Lake Landfill, more so about West Lake Landfill, given the nature of the radioactive material there and all the work being done.
I could look into and get back to you on a depth measurement for, say, naturally occurring radioactive materials in soil, which is what we were really looking for at BMAC. I don't know that offhand. But again, the point of the gamma survey is to indicate the presence of any gamma emitting isotope. Now, there is a range of energy that this machine can see, but the particular isotopes that don't fall into that range, we've also specifically had analysis for in the soil samples. And the only reason that we would suspect we need to do that is if certain isotopes are not in equilibrium with their decay series. So our normal investigation process always involves doing a gamma survey to indicate areas of contamination and then taking analytical samples. You have to look for it in some way, and gamma is the easiest way to, it has the furthest range, and this particular detector will see radiation over a wide energy range. So that's why it's used, and that's the purpose, and it does a good job at doing that. Depth-wise, though, I'd have to get back to you on that.
My question was about that, it's not for.
Okay, sorry.
I don't know.
Real quick, at what depth did you go to take those soil samples? Were they just 6 inches, did you go down 3 feet?
They're surface samples, 0 to 2 inches. Just a second, hand his hand. The guy in the blue shirt, I'm sorry.
I have the same question.
Okay, ma'am.
You talked about the background across the whole United States. Was it the Department of Energy's 75 to 79 report? Do you know?
That's not. That particular one is not the one that we've looked at. I don't know if I've seen that one or not, but I'm trying to recall. The point is that most of the results show total uranium potentially total thorium. They don't break it down into individual isotopes. So when we use those references to compare, they're only limitedly useful in the sense that you can approximate based on that value what some of these isotopes down the decay chain will be, but there isn't a measured value like what we've taken to compare them to.
Okay, my basic question was, I was wanting to figure out what report you guys were using as your background. I didn't know if it was the 79 report, 75 to 70.
Again, we plan on using our reference areas to establish background, but the purpose of including these other reference documents is to add a piece of evidence to indicate that these really are representative of background. If we saw some of these other documents indicating levels below, significantly below what we were finding, then that would indicate to us that we need to do some additional investigation. So I could get back to you on the document, but it'll be in the final report. You'll have it in a couple of weeks.
Okay, and I'll send Ben the report that I'm talking about so you know which one I'm referring to.
Okay, and we can evaluate that.
Okay.
Ma'am?
Who decided to look at titanium? It's not a daughter product of uranium or radium.
Okay. I assume Tom's going to look at the decay chain here.
It should be thallium-208. I think it was a typo.
Oh, yes, that's correct.
It's a daughter of lead-212, which is in the thorium indicator.
What's she saying?
So it wasn't titanium?
It's thallium, TL.
Okay. We will fix that.
Who decided that background was 15,000 pounds per minute?
Just a second. Just for the record, I'm the one that typed those in. So the lab report, I'm sure it was accurate.
What you meant.
Okay. I'm sorry. 15,000?
Who decided background? I mean, when you say that such and such, 30,000 was just twice background, who decided to use 15,000 pounds per minute as background?
Nobody said anything about 15,000 counts per minute.
What 30,000 you say is twice background?
30,300 counts per minute was the highest reading in any one spot that we got out of 58,000 points at BMAC. The highest reading was
not that
30.
one, it was just before this. Somewhere you have, no, not that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the highest value of all the 58,000 points that we got. That's not an average. That's not there's no, that was the actual highest response reading that we got from that instrumentation at any one point in those 58,000 points.
Well, I thought you had a different chart that showed 30,000 was twice background.
No.
Yeah, there's something
on the map that says twice background.
Yeah, twice that.
Hold on, I'll go there.
No, not that, there's still another one.
CPM.
Yeah, the red one.
Any red dot on that map represents greater than twice background.
What is background was
Twice background
twice?
would be the average background concentration that we calculated.
Didn't you have still another chart with numbers? I'm sorry, I didn't make that up, that it said twice background. 30,000 was twice background.
30,000 is the highest reading that we got at any one
But
point.
you had a whole bunch close to 30,000.
I got two charts with numbers on them. I have this one and I have the other one. Okay? This is just a simplification of the other one so that you can see what the exact highest reading was from any one point.
Oh, you said
The
nothing.
left-
What's that sentence at the top?
Nothing twice average background. That is EPA's screening rule of thumb. So if I'm out there doing a radiation screen, I work for the emergency response program. Again, I loved your answer. I'm not a first responder. I'm not a policeman. I'm not a fireman. I'm not I'm not a paramedic, or I don't ride in an ambulance. But we do emergency response. So when there's an emergency, somebody calls and says, hey, we have a radiological incident, we need somebody to come in here and look into this. That's when my group would show up. And what we would do is we would take the first thing that we had on the truck, and that is an instrument like what I showed you. And although often it would probably be swinging in my hand, we wouldn't have all the fancy gadgets attached to it. And what we would do is we would go walk around and we would say, all right, I looked across the street, I looked down the street, I looked over by the hotel, I got an average reading of X.
Yeah.
And so now I'm over
Tell
here
me,
in
what
this.
does that mean up at the top? That sentence?
That's where I'm going. Give me a second, please. So, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Well, get to the point. I think that's what she's.
Well, I'm trying to. I go to his site and he says, I've had a release. And I take this same meter and I walk out there and I'm saying, all right, I found some radiation, could be background, could be from whatever, but my rule of thumb is it twice what I found in other areas? And that's what I'm trying to tell you, that we didn't find. As a screening tool, using this instrumentation, we did not find anything that exceeded our rule of thumb level of twice the average concentration that we found at either of the reference locations.
And we're gonna have to close this down because they've got to leave at 9 o'clock, and then according to my watch, that's 1 minute from right now. Most of the questions that are coming out really are questions about what's going to be the results whenever these other answers come. So a lot of these are, about how did you come to this data, well, really most people here are interested in what is going to be the results of everything that you presented right here, and that's not available.
And the take-home point is, in 2 weeks we'll have a final report, and I'm sure we'll be back here to talk about the final report. There's one last question.
Can that be answered in about 30 seconds, ma'am?
Why would those soil samples only go 2 inches deep? Why wouldn't you go deeper?
Because we're looking at surface values.
They get any dirt put on it periodically. And then they're looking covered up, it's still there. 2 inches isn't enough to cover it.
But we were looking at exposure pathways, and where's the logical exposure pathway from the radiation? It's going to come from the surface. Because you're not excavating that soil. That the intended use of that soil is recreational. You're playing baseball on it. You're being exposed to the surface.